Hello everybody and welcome to week 4 of our workshop series. This time we're doing first steps into Unity. We'll be using Unity to build a 3D adventure game. So hopefully at this point you've all worked through the setup and you have Unity set up. So before we do anything, let's just open up Unity and open up the project that we set up through the setup PDF. So before we get started, I'd like to give a brief introduction about who I am. So my name is Andy. I am present here at vhHacks, currently a first-year student at UBC, hoping to study computer science. I've been doing game development. I started with a spring break camp in grade 5, so I've been doing it for a good 7, almost 8 years now, and sort of on and off, but it's been really fun, and so I thought I'd share that with you guys here today. So our agenda today is going to look like this. So first we'll show off a little bit of what we're making and what that looks like the game that we'll be building. And then we'll go straight into level design. We'll build a simple level. We'll create some interactables such as like opening doors or moving platforms, health kits, etc. We'll go into some combat, like healing the player, damaging the player, healing, and we'll bring in some enemies. And then we'll just have some closing thoughts about continuing on with using Unity and how to get started with all of that. So first off, let's take a look at what we're making. So if you're live here today, you can check out the stream. On the stream, you'll hopefully be able to hear audio. So if you open up the stream right now, I'm not sure if everybody's in it. If you go to your Discord and then open up the stream tab, you should be able to see the exact same thing, but as stream view. And we'll open up the video.
Don't you come back no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more. 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 Hit the road.
So there it is. That's our little video demonstration of the little template level that we built. You can see we have a player, we have some basic combat, we have that interaction with opening the doors, and then at the end there it sort of pans out into a larger view. The level and everything is slightly tentative in this video, but hopefully, this gets you a little bit excited for what we'll be building today. All right. So let's take our first step into level design. So for level design, we're going to be using the default assets that were provided by the Unity 3D Game Kit, and we'll be building a small, simple level that looks something like this. Right. So this is our general design here. What we have are, I guess, 3 chambers in a sort of side hallway here. This main one is where our player is going to spawn in. We'll have a moving platform here that brings us across. We have some pressure plates to activate platforms. We have a second one. This one's going to be like a sort of dungeon full of enemies. And the third one, which is just going to have some more interactables, have some more stuff, just to add a bit of variety to the level, right? So let's open up Unity and let's get to designing. So in Unity, what you should see right now, if you just open it up, you should see this sort of empty sample scene. Most of the time with an empty project, we'll start here, but because we have the 3D Game Kit for us today, we can navigate to our 3D Game Kit assets, into the scenes, and we'll open up the template scene. And what the template scene is it's essentially still a blank scene, but they've added a terrain plane for us where the player can walk on, and they've added in, you know, the character model that they give us, and a whole bunch of like just basic stuff like shading, lighting, just to set it up so it looks a little bit nicer than just our empty scene, right? So hopefully you see something like this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in some rocks, or you want to add in some rocks and just form that basic shape that we saw in the previous slide. So I'm going to click up here in the top right. This will set it to isometric view, which will make it easier to just sort of lay stuff out top down, right? Set the view up. And let's drag in some rock prefabs. So let's navigate to our 3D game kit, into our into our prefabs, sorry. Environment, rock. And you can see here we have a whole bunch of different rock assets. Currently they haven't all loaded in yet. And we'll just drag these out into the general shape. So first, our plane is a little bit small, so I'll select our plane. On the side here, I'll scale it up to, let's say 5 by, the Y is the same, and then 5 for the Z. And then let's just drag in some edges here. You can see these are quite large cliffs. Hit E to rotate it, so we can rotate this to match approximately what we want it to look like. W is to move it around. So we'll have our sort of adjustments here. And we'll go through with this until we've basically built out our entire level, right? So we have this main chamber here. Let's build out, I guess, sort of a second one off to the side here. Drag this on in. I'll make the terrain a little bit bigger just because it's a little bit small at the moment. Let's make that 10 by 10. The way the 3D game kit works is it's really smart, so it automatically scales our textures and tiles to our terrain. So we don't need to worry about any of that. We can just scale it up to whatever size we need here. So by the way, the stuff that I'm using to rearrange this, press E to rotate, W to move. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. And then we can use that to sort of create our level here. Alright, now I'm going to switch my view around a bit, and right click allows us to sort of look around, and middle click allows us to move around. I switched to perspective so we can just see a little bit better around the place. And I'm just going to use this to make sure our walls and stuff all line up properly. You can see this one doesn't quite. I'm going to hit R to resize it and stretch it out this way. And rotate it a little bit. Same thing for this wall here. We can see that it's not fully aligned, so we'll move this over. We'll hit R to stretch it again, hit E to rotate it, and hit W to sort of move it into place. And now we should see that we have generally designed a somewhat nice looking level here that encapsulates our player, and there we have it. So we have one chamber here, the second chamber here, and then eventually we'll have a third chamber here, but we'll just keep these two for now. So let's run the game now and see what that looks like. So let me change this to, sorry, I just, question in the chat. Yeah, so the stream is just for sound. Again, on the face cam is where you'll actually be seeing the code and like the slides and stuff. I was just using the stream for sound. Sorry if that was unclear. Here, I'll switch it over to here now, so hopefully you'll be able to hear things. So now, okay, obviously our rocks are not lined up vertically correctly, but you can see we have this little level here. It should encapsulate us, and then it'll give us a little pathway off to the side here that will have some more stuff in it. And it's looking pretty good so far. So let's quit out of that. I will switch over to the move tool and just realign some of these downwards a little bit, just so that we don't have any more floating rocks and meshes and stuff. All right, now while we're here, if we go back to our slide here, we'll notice this sort of red pit here. And what this red pit is it's essentially going to be a little acid pool that we have in our room here. And let's put that right around here. So it'll be a little pit of acid that we can't really walk in, and we have to sort of walk over. All right, so let's start building the valley that this acid pool is going to sit in. And that will require deforming and reforming the terrain. So to do this, let's go to our right-hand panel here, select the plane, and then scroll down and open Pro Builder. Pro Builder is a tool that Unity has that allows us to reshape and reform meshes. And in this case, the terrain mesh is one of those meshes, so we'll be reshaping and reforming that. So on the top here, we'll select Face Selection. And let's select, go to isometric view. Let's select these faces here, right? These faces are the one that the acid pool is going to sit in. I will hit subdivide faces. And what subdivide faces, I'll hit it twice. What that allows us to do is it gives us more polygons for us to manipulate, and therefore when we reshape it, it'll have more detail. So those faces have been subdivided. Now let's form it. So we're going to go to our tools, top panel up here, go to polybrush, and then open up our polybrush window. I'll move this, dock this to the side here, to the side of my scene view. And then what we can do is, I'll switch back to perspective view. What we can do now is we select our brush tool in the top left hand here. Let's adjust the outer radius and inner radius to be a little bit larger, so just so we do more. And then hover over the region that we want to depress. Hit Control and just sort of move our mouse around that region. Right. What this will do is it'll bring the terrain downwards. Right. So hopefully we'll notice, you can see we're slowly like bringing the terrain downwards here. And the more we do it, the more the terrain will deform and depress. All right, so now that that's done, I'm going to undock the polybrush window and close it. And then we'll run our game again and just take a look and see if we actually see this little like valley, this little dip in the terrain. We walk over here and we can see indeed there is a little pool here now. It gets a little bit deeper and if we walk into it, we die, right? It's this little, I like to call it a valley of death, right? So that's great. Yeah, I like to call this a little valley of death. We've gone through, we've created our rock borders, we've deformed the terrain with ProBuilder and Polybrush, and that's all we need to do to set up our template level. So now let's get on to building some interactables into our game. So interactables, there are two types that we'll be using today. We'll be using triggers and receivers. So a trigger is something that calls a command on an object. In this case, that's like a pressure pad or a switch. And then a receiver is something that takes in that input and does something. So that would be, a door or a moving platform, right? So let's cross that valley that we just built. We want to move across it. And so what we'll do here is we'll create a moving platform prefab. We'll set its bounds. We'll change its movement type. And then we'll activate it with our pressure plate. So let's go into our workshop here. To find our interactable moving platform, we'll go into interactables. We should see over here we have this moving platform prefab. So we can just drag that into our scene here. I'm going to hit E and rotate it so it goes along the valley that we just created. This way, W again, and we'll move the start a little bit off to the side here. So now our moving platform is placed in, right? You can see it just lies on the ground here. We want to move the end point, because right now if we preview it, we can see the preview position here. It only moves across this little distance here. That's not going to be quite nearly enough to get us across this chasm, right? So what we want to do is we want to move this sort of end gizmo all the way across. And now if we preview, it'll move us all the way across, right? So for now, I'm just going to check activate and run the game and just sort of see what that looks like. So you can see here, now we have a moving platform that sort of crosses this little valley, and it crosses and then it just doesn't come back. Unfortunate for us. So we're going to change the behavior a little bit more. We want this platform to go over and come back over and over again. So we're going to change the loop type to ping pong. So now when we start this, we'll see that the platform goes across and comes back and goes across and comes back. We also want to make this activated by a pressure plate, right? So we're going to uncheck activate. And let's add in our pressure pad somewhere into the scene here. So our player spawns over here. Let's take this little nook here and drag in a pressure pad. Be careful, there are two pressure pads here. We want to select the pressure pad trigger. Move that into our scene here. I'm going to drop it down a little bit so it meshes into the ground. And then with this pressure pad, what we want to do is we want to set two things in here. We want to set our interaction type. In this case, we want to activate it because if we go back to our moving platform, we'll see that its interaction type is activate. So we will set this to activate. We'll make our interactive object, click the little circle on the right-hand side here, select our moving platform. That is the moving platform that's in our scene. And that should be good. So now, let's start the game. You should see a white connecting line now that connects this pressure pad to the moving platform. So now if we start the game, we can see that the platform is on the other side. It's not moving. But if we step on the pressure pad, which should activate, oh, it's a little bit too far into the terrain there. We can see that the moving platform now moves across, back and forth, across this little valley here, and it lets us get into this region here, which is perfect. It's exactly what we would have wanted, right? Because otherwise down here, again, Valley of Death, we just die. So I'll go back here. I'm going to quickly just go here and move this up. I'm going to hide the grid because that can get in the way of seeing things. Move this up a little bit. Toggle that back on. So now that's our interactable moving platform in place. Now let's say we also want a massive gateway here, right over where my cursor is, and we want to open a door. All right. So for opening a door, it's quite a similar process. We create a door prefab, we create a second pressure plate, and then we use that pressure plate to open the door. So let's do that. We'll take our door huge gateway that's within our interactables. Right? I'm going to rotate this so it fits in here. Make sure it looks nice and dandy right here. I'm going to move it a little bit to the side, rotate a little bit more. So now you can see we have this sort of gateway that's blocking us out from access to the outside world here. We'll go back into this room and I'll add in a second pressure pad trigger right at the end here. For our door, because we only wanted to open once, we're going to check is one shot. That basically tells us that once it's been activated once, it'll stay open for the rest of the game. And then for our pressure pad, we're going to do the same thing. So for our pressure pad, our interactive type, our interaction type, we want it to be open because you can see this door here is an open. We open the door. And we want our interactive object to be our door huge gateway. So again, you can see this white line pops up. This pressure pad now links to this door over here, and it should open it. So let's run it and test it again and see what we get. Walk over here, step on the pressure pad, this platform starts moving, the door is still closed, but if we go over, hop on, let it bring us across here. Oh, it's a little bit laggy, that's okay. Walk onto the pressure plate, and if we come back, just wait for this platform to bring us back. We should now see that this door is open here. So now we have two interactables, one that allows us to get across a moving platform and one that allows us to open the door. Right. So that's all fine and dandy. And we have all our interactions set up now. So next, let's move on to combat. Combat is where things get a little bit more exciting. So first, let's deal with some stuff with damaging and healing the player before we even get into building any enemies. So remember that acid pool that we talked about, that little valley of death? Let's actually build in the acid. So if we go back to our game here, the reason why we were dying earlier is because if I go into isometric view and sort of look from this side here, in our game project we have something called a death volume. And what a death volume is it's this sort of volume that lines under the level of our game that basically tells the game to kill the player if it falls underneath this level, right? So basically if you jump off the map, it'll kill the player. That's exactly why we were dying when we were jumping into this little valley over here, is because we were falling into the death volume, right? But that's not necessarily what we want, right? Sometimes we want it so that, like, we want to have more precise control over it. So I'm actually going to drop this death volume a little bit lower here, so it's out of range of our little valley that we created. And what I'm going to do now, switch back to perspective view, is I'm going to add in an asset pool. So you can see here in our interactables, we have this asset pool here, right? This is an asset pool prefab. I'll drag that right into the map. Supposed to be where the valley is. You can see this is not quite it. So we'll adjust this, move this around a little bit over here. And we'll resize it to fit inside of the valley that we created. So hit R, resize it out this way, resize it out that way. We have our little asset pool valley right here, right? Now, again, going back to the idea of a death volume, currently this acid won't harm us. If we jump in game, we can walk through this acid because nothing is telling it to damage us. The death volume that we were originally using is now down here. It's no longer in range of our acid pool. This is not a great visual representation because Unity grids are not great. If we want to make the acid damage us, we want to manually add a death volume component. So we'll add a component here at the bottom. Let's search up death volume. And that's it. It should now inherit all the code from death volume. And now if we walk into it, we should, well, die. So let's give that a try. So you can see we have our little bubbling pool of acid here. And if we walk into it, our player dies, right? And it'll respawn us. So now this adds a whole new thread of, oh, we can't cross this. We need to activate that platform there, right? So great, the player dies, but what about respawning? What if we wanted to bring the player back to life? So let's move on to creating checkpoints and respawns. So we'll be doing two things in this section. We'll create a spawn point, and then we'll create a checkpoint. And this checkpoint will have a crystal indicator that lights up blue when we interact with it. So first, let's do a checkpoint. So checkpoints exist, if we go back to our slides here, in the assets under 3D Game Kit in our utilities folder in the prefabs. So let's navigate to that here, utilities. We see this is where our player is. We'll drag in a checkpoint right on top of where that player is. Right, you can see that it is this little box here. I'm going to move it to that player. And now what will happen is every time, right when we spawn in, we will collide with this sort of volume that is our checkpoint. And then it will set our spawn to exactly where we are in that area. Right. So we've already done this before, and we already know that like when we die, it'll bring us back there. But now we're setting an actual spawn point here now. And so if we die in the acid, it should bring us back here and respawn us with a nice little respawn animation. Right? That's quite pretty. Now, let's say we get across the acid and we're like, oh, yay, we want to be able to set a checkpoint here for our player. And we want to, you know, have them be able to spawn on the other side of the acid if they do die and fall and die again, right? So let's bring in a second checkpoint volume. We're going to resize this down. Checkpoint 1. Resize this down here. I might actually make it even a little bit smaller. And we'll move it into sort of this corner here. And there we go. So this checkpoint technically works. If we walk into it, we should see that we'll respawn there. But we kind of want the player to know that something has been activated when we walk in there as well. So we'll use the crystal prefab that is in our prefabs, in our interactables. We'll drag the crystal out right on top of our checkpoint. We'll bring this up a little bit so it's floating. So this crystal, we want it to activate when we step into our checkpoint, right? So let's make our checkpoint into an interactable object. So first we'll take our crystal. I'm going to set the layer to checkpoints, so it's on the same layer as our checkpoints. For our checkpoint prefab, I'm going to add a component that is called send on trigger enter. This way, when we walk into our checkpoint, it'll send a command to a certain object. Right, let me just recenter this checkpoint onto our crystal. Very nice. So now we have this send on trigger enter script. We want to make this interaction type to activate. We want to make this object the crystal that we just placed in. We're going to check one shot, and let's check the player layer to be the player. If I can find that here. Player. So now let's run the game and test this second checkpoint. We'll walk over here. Let's activate this moving platform. Whee. We walk into this checkpoint here. You can see it activates. It starts glowing blue. And now if we die, it'll respawn us here at our checkpoint. Right? Obviously we respawn inside of the crystal. Maybe not what we want, but our checkpoint has been activated, and that looks pretty good so far. So now let's add in some enemies, some things that we can attack that add a bit more challenge into our game. So we'll be creating the Chomper, which is an enemy that is built inside of a 3D game kit, and we'll be using that to damage and attack our player. So let's go into, let's open this little scene up here. Actually, I'll move over to this side of the level, right? Let's go into our 3D game kit, into our prefabs, characters, enemies folder. And in the enemies, we want to use the Chomper, right? There are two Chompers here. Unity is freezing for a little bit. There are two Chompers. There's a Chomper and the Chomper Ragdoll. We just want the Chomper. The Chomper Ragdoll is what it transitions into when it dies. But we'll just drag in, let's drag in like just one Chomper for now. So let's put the Chomper, I don't know, just out of range of our player here. Or in range of our player, I guess, because this has such a big detection range. If we run the game, we will see some pretty interesting behavior. You can see that the Chomper notices us and it's trying to run towards us, but it can't move towards us. And that's because it doesn't have a navigation mesh to move on. It doesn't know where it's trying to move right now. So let's get rid of this Chomper for now. Delete it. We'll select our terrain plane on the left-hand side here. And we want to add a nav mesh surface. What that tells us is it gives us a surface that this Chomper enemy can run on. So we'll add a new component, call it a nav mesh surface at the bottom here. For our agent type, we want to choose Chomper because that's the thing that will be walking on it. We want to select not all the layers, but just our environment and our vegetation. And then we want to hit bake. And once it is baked, you can see we have this blue that paints over this entire platform that tells us, or tells the game, where the enemy can move. And it can move anywhere that is painted blue here, right? So now, let's go back here. Let's pull in some more chompers. And let's add them in to protect this sort of pressure plate here, add a bit more challenge to it. I'm going to go on the side here. There are a couple of things that we can adjust. So we can adjust a whole bunch of things here. First, we can adjust our hit points, our maximum health and hit points. I'm going to change that to 2 for this one. And then we can also adjust our in our player scanner, our detection radius, which is how far we detect the player, and our detection angle, right? So this is sort of, in this blue circle is where it'll detect our player and start running towards it. And so we'll do that the same thing. We'll drop the detection radius, drop the detection angle, and drag in, I'll drag in one more chomper right across here that has a smaller detection radius and a smaller detection angle. We can facing the player here. Alright, so let's hop in game now and test out these new enemies that we just made. At this point, by the way, does anyone have any questions or any concerns? Or do you guys want me to slow down a little bit? Speed up? Alright, so we have a little pressure plate here. We walk towards it, we step on it. Platform is activated. Jump onto it. It brings us across this little acid pool here. We activate our checkpoint. And now, these chompers are able to chase and run towards us. And we're able to attack them back. And this one has 2 health, so we'll have to hit him twice for it to die. Perfect. So now we have some combat in our game. Stepping on this pressure plate will activate the door in the back that we already know about. And that activates this door. Alrighty. Now the last thing we're going to do today, and this one is where we bring in a little bit of code and we actually start writing a couple of our own functions, is we will work on restoring player health, right? So let's say we had a super difficult enemy, Chomper here, that had like 5-10 health, and it does a bunch of damage to our player. We want to be able to restore that somewhere, right? So how we do that first is let's go back into our interactables. We have this health crate prefab here. This health crate prefab is going to give our player health when we walk over it. Let's move that in right along here. I'll just move it next to our pressure plate, so it's sort of, you know, a reward for getting past this past those enemies. And let's just take a look at what it does so far. So step on the pressure plate. Lag. Walk over here. Hop on the platform. Hop over. Get our checkpoint activated. Hopefully run out of detection of these chompers here, or not. You can see we take some damage here from one of the chompers. If we walk towards it, there's this cool animation that plays that shows the health crate opening, but we don't get healed up at all. So we want that to happen, right? So let's open this. We'll go to our interact on trigger script, and we can see right now when we walk towards it, it'll do a couple of things. It'll enable the box collider, it'll play some sounds. We also want this to heal our player. So let's add on runtime. We'll select in our scene. We want to select the Ellen player object that we have in our scene, right? So that will be, I'll search up Ellen. We'll just choose our Ellen prefab, right? We won't make sure we're choosing our scene, so it's something that exists in our scene and not just one of our assets, because this way it'll heal up that specific instance, that specific object. And we'll call the function inside of our damageable script that is called reset damage. This basically sets our health back to full. So let's run it again and let's give it a shot. So if we look back here, we'll see we add our interact on trigger and we call our reset damage function. So hopefully we walk onto the pressure plan. Platform is activated. Jump onto it. Let's take a little bit of damage. You can see if we walk over to the health crate, if we walk over to the health crate, it'll glow and our health will heal all the way up to full, right? And so that's great, it works. We can heal up our player now, we can set our spawn point, we can attack enemies, we can activate objects, we can do a whole bunch of really great stuff now, all due to the 3D game kit. So one last question I had was, what if we wanted to heal instead? What if instead of regenerating all the way to full, we wanted to heal 1 heart? Well, this would be asking us to create our own script here, our own code for healing our player. So we'll create our own heal function. So let's open the damageable script inside of Ellen. We'll scroll down to where reset damage is, and we'll add a new method to the code. That is this code on the left, and then let's test it. So we'll go back to our project, quit out of the game. Let's navigate to our Ellen on the left side here. We see our damageable script, double click it. Sorry, not that. Double click this script here, and this will open it in Visual Studio. So you can see we have a whole bunch of code here. All this code is for managing the player taking damage. And so we can see here we have a reset damage here. And if we look at this code, you know, it sets our current hit points to our maximum hit points. It does a whole bunch of stuff to reset, whatever. Let's add in the method that we just had here, which is right here, public void heal. So we type in public, my keyboard is public void heal, open bracket, close bracket, and we want to check if our current hit points is less than our max hit points. So if we still have health that we can heal, we'll just simply increment our current hit points. We'll do current hit points plus plus. And then we want to call on reset damage dot invoke. And this just tells our game that we have healed up. We have reset our damage, right? So this is how like code works in Unity. We have our start, we have our update, and then we have a whole bunch of other methods and functions that we can call at any time during our game. And so if we go back to our Unity here, let it compile our C# scripts here. I can actually close Visual Studio. If we go back to our health crate here, instead of calling our reset damage function, we want to navigate to our damageable and click our heal function, the one that we just wrote. And now we should fully heal the player once we walk into the health. So again, we'll activate this pressure plate here. And we'll see, oh, you know, there are our platform is activated. Let's jump on top of it. Cross this acid pool here. Set our spawn. And then, ah, no, there are so many enemies attacking. Ah, we take 1 damage. And then we take 2 hearts of damage. Okay. There we go. Okay. So now we've taken 2 hearts of damage, and we should see if we walk over to this crate here. Our heart ticks up by 1 health instead of resetting all the way to full. And so there we go. We've successfully written in our own piece of code into this into our game that does a function that we wanted it to do. Right. So, so thank you guys so much for being here. That's the end of what we'll be doing today. Hopefully that's been enough to sort of get you started with the Unity 3D game kit and sort of get you familiarized with working with Unity. Some closing thoughts, like of course there's so much more you can build, so many cool levels you can build. Actually I'll showcase one right now. So we built this really simple level, but the 3D game kit also comes with a sort of preview level. Save, we want to save our progress. That looks fantastic, and it just sort of shows how powerful this game kit can be and how much stuff you can really build in it. So we'll take a look here. Meanwhile, while this loads up, Unity is like pretty fantastic because this game kit allows us to build a whole bunch of stuff without having to do any code at all. And also, if we wanted to do any code, we remember our components on the right hand side. Just by choosing anything and adding a component, you can create a new script, and in that script you can write whatever type of code you want, and it's super powerful. It can do a whole bunch of things. So Alright, for the recording's sake, I'm going to end the recording here. So I want to give credit to Unity for designing the 3D game kit assets, as well as to the YouTube channel JNM for on whose workshop we adapted. A recording of this workshop will be on YouTube. If you have any questions about this workshop today, feel free to ask them in our Discord server or hang out afterwards. Also, invite your friends to our Discord via vhHacks.ch/discord. If you make any cool levels or do any cool designs, share them off in Ship and Share. And thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for learning with us at vhHacks. And we hope to see you there in March. Goodbye.